The bright sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the bustling city streets. On the crowded bus, the hum of conversations blended with the soft rattle of the engine as it made its way through the neighborhood. Among the sea of passengers, one young boy stood out. His name was Malik, a 15-year-old black teen with a heart as pure as gold, but a fate that would soon test his strength in ways he couldn't have imagined. Malik wasn't like most teenagers his age. Born blind, he navigated the world through sounds, smells, and the feeling of the ground beneath his feet. He had learned to rely on his cane, his memory, and the kindness of others to make his way through life. Despite his challenges, he was known for his unwavering optimism and his deep sense of empathy. He didn't see the world in the same way as others, he felt it in all its beauty and cruelty. But today, the world would show him a side he had never experienced before. It started like any other ordinary day. Malik had just gotten on the bus after finishing school, his trusty cane tapping rhythmically against the floor as he made his way to an empty seat. He was exhausted from the day's lessons, but his mind was still sharp, his heart still full of hope. As the bus rattled along, Malik felt the warmth of the seat as he sat down, grateful for a moment of rest. But then, something shifted in the air. It wasn't a sound, nor a smell, but an energy, an uncomfortable tension that seemed to fill the space around him. He could sense the people around him subtly shift, their focus moving from the windows and their phones to him. Malik felt a cold rush of unease settle over him. It was as if a storm was brewing just behind him, waiting for the right moment to strike. That moment came when a white woman, visibly pregnant and struggling with a heavy shopping bag, boarded the bus. The crowd shifted, making space for her, but no one offered to give up their seat. The bus was crowded, but not enough to force anyone to stand. Malik, though exhausted, saw her struggle. Without a second thought, he stood up and offered her his seat, the way his parents had always taught him. Kindness was a gift to give, no matter your circumstances. But just as Malik was about to offer his seat, a voice cut through the air. It wasn't a voice filled with gratitude or recognition. It was mocking, cruel, and filled with disdain. Malik's stomach dropped as he recognized the voice of the bus's security guard. "Look at that," the officer sneered, his tone dripping with sarcasm. A blind kid, giving up his seat to a woman who could just as easily stand. "How noble of you, hero." The words stung. Malik could feel the weight of the officer's judgment, his gaze burning into him even though he couldn't see it. The crowd on the bus shifted uncomfortably, some of them too afraid to intervene, others too stunned by the officer's words to react. But Malik didn't flinch. He had learned not to let words hurt him. He had learned to keep moving forward, no matter how cruel the world might be. But the officer wasn't done. "What's next?" he jeered. "Are you going to guide her to her seat too? Or maybe I should help you, blind boy. You seem to need it." A few passengers chuckled nervously, but Malik could hear the discomfort in their laughter. They didn't know how to stand up for him, how to confront the injustice happening right in front of them. The tension on the bus grew thick, and Malik's heart pounded in his chest. He had faced discrimination before, but never like this. Never with such venom, such cruelty. But just as Malik was about to turn away, hoping the moment would pass, something unexpected happened. The doors of the bus opened at the next stop, and in stepped a man. He moved with authority, his footsteps confident and strong. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a commanding presence that immediately captured the attention of everyone in the bus. His eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on the officer, there was a sudden shift in the atmosphere. The man's voice was calm but firm, and there was no mistaking the authority in it. "What's going on here?" he asked, his gaze never leaving the officer. The officer's smug expression faltered, and for a split second, Malik could feel a wave of relief wash over him. There was something in the man's presence that made everything feel just a little bit safer, a little more just. But who is this man? Why did he seem so familiar? As the officer stammered, trying to explain himself, the man stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "I think you owe this young man an apology," he said, his voice carrying an edge that made it clear he wasn't going to let this slide. The officer's face turned pale as he realized who this man was. The tension on the bus was palpable, and Malik could almost feel the wheels turning in the officer's mind. There was something in the man's demeanor, something that made the officer recognize him as more than just another passenger. And then, the man spoke again, his words like a bombshell. "I'm Chief Roberts. This is my son." The words hit Malik like a thunderclap. The man standing before him wasn't just a stranger. He was the chief of police and Malik's father. The officer's face drained of color, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to find words. But it was too late. The damage had been done. Malik could feel the weight of the situation, the shift in the air as the bus fell silent. No one knew what would happen next, but everyone knew that this moment was about to change everything. Would Malik's father stand up for him, or would this moment of cruelty go unanswered? Would the officer face any consequences, or would the system protect him as it had so many others before? Malik's heart raced as he waited for his father's next move. The eyes of the entire bus were on them, and in that instant, the weight of the world seemed to rest on the shoulders of a blind, 15-year-old boy. But Malik was stronger than anyone realized. He had faced adversity before, and no matter what happened next, he knew he would face it head-on. But before anything else could happen, the bus came to an abrupt stop. The door swung open, and Malik's father, Chief Roberts, turned to him with a look that was a mixture of concern and pride. "You're stronger than you know, son," he whispered. And with that, the scene faded to black, leaving the passengers of the bus and everyone watching, wondering what would happen next. Would Malik and his father confront the officer, or would they walk away from this moment of injustice, leaving the world to continue its cycle of cruelty? The answer would come soon, but for now, the tension in the air was all that remained. The bus doors closed, but the tension remained, thick in the air, hanging over everyone. Malik sat frozen, his cane still in his hand, his heart racing with a mixture of confusion and hope. Chief Roberts, his father, stood tall before the officer, his hands folded in front of him. The chief's presence seemed to tower over the officer in the same way the morning sun towers over the city buildings, casting long, unavoidable shadows. Malik couldn't quite understand what had just happened. 1 minute, he was offering his seat to a pregnant woman, trying to do something good in the world, and the next his father, his own father, was there, revealing himself as the chief of police. It didn't make sense. How had he even known? Malik hadn't seen him on the bus, and there had been no phone call, no message. Malik's mind raced as he tried to piece together what had just unfolded in front of him. As the officer stammered, trying to collect his thoughts, Malik could feel the weight of his father's gaze. There was no mistaking the quiet authority that came with his father's position. Chief Roberts had worked his way up from the streets, starting out as a beat cop, and now he was the head of the department. He had seen it all: racial tension, corruption, injustice, but he had always promised Malik that he would fight for what was right. That was why Malik trusted him, even when the world seemed so full of contradictions. And yet, now, Malik wasn't sure what to feel. He had always admired his father's strength, his confidence, but today was different. This wasn't just about standing up for justice. It was about Malik himself, about how he was seen by others, how the world viewed him. And the cruel words of the officer still echoed in his ears, the mocking tone impossible to shake off. The officer finally managed to speak, but it was more of a defensive sputter than a coherent response. I didn't mean any harm. I was just joking. You know how it is on these buses," he muttered, his eyes darting nervously between Chief Roberts and the other passengers, who were now watching the confrontation unfold in stunned silence. But Malik knew better. He had heard those words too many times before. "I didn't mean any harm." They were empty. They were excuses. The officer's attempt to justify his behavior only made Malik's stomach churn. It was easy for people to brush things off as jokes when they didn't feel the sting of those words. But Malik felt it, deep down in his bones. And he knew his father did, too. Chief Roberts didn't flinch. His face remained stoic, but Malik could hear the tension in his father's voice as he spoke again, his words slow, deliberate. "You will not mock my son. Not in front of me. not in front of anyone. Understand? The officer, now visibly sweating, nodded rapidly. Yes, sir, I understand. I'm sorry, but it wasn't enough. Malik could sense it. The officer's apology was hollow, a mere formality, a desperate attempt to escape the consequences of his actions. It didn't change the fact that he had humiliated Malik in front of a bus full of people, and no apology could erase that. The bus fell silent once more, the passengers awkwardly shifting in their seats. Some of them, Malik noticed, avoided eye contact, while others looked at the officer with a mix of judgment and disbelief. But no one spoke up. Not a single person came to Malik's defense, not even the woman he had given his seat to. She had thanked him, but in the end, she hadn't stepped in to stop the officer. Malik couldn't decide if that disappointed him more than the officer's cruelty. As the bus rumbled on, Chief Roberts took a step back, his posture still commanding but no longer confrontational. He turned to Malik, his face softening slightly. "Are you all right, son?" he asked, his voice now full of concern. Malik wanted to say yes. He wanted to tell his father that he was fine, that he could handle this, that he had learned how to navigate the world's cruelties long ago. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he just nodded silently, gripping his cane a little tighter, his throat tightening with emotions he couldn't quite express. "I know it's hard," Chief Roberts continued, his eyes searching Malik's face. "I know it feels like the world is against you sometimes, but you've got to remember, your strength isn't in how others treat you. It's in how you handle it. Don't let people like him tear you down. You're better than that." Malik's heart swelled with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. He knew his father meant well, but the truth was that no amount of encouragement could change the way people saw him. No matter how strong he was, no matter how much he rose above the hate, there would always be people like the officer, people who would look at him and see only his blindness, his race, his difference. "I don't want you to get hurt," Chief Roberts added quietly, his voice tinged with a hint of vulnerability. "But I also want you to stand up for yourself, for what's right. You've got a powerful voice, Malik. Don't be afraid to use it." Before Malik could respond, the bus came to another stop. Chief Roberts looked at him one last time, his expression unreadable, before turning toward the officer. "Get off the bus," he ordered. The officer hesitated, his eyes flicking to the other passengers, but Chief Roberts wasn't asking. He was telling. With a heavy sigh, the officer stood up and made his way toward the door, his head hung low. As he passed by Malik, he mumbled another apology, but Malik didn't acknowledge it. He had heard enough. As the bus doors closed behind the officer, the tension in the air seemed to dissipate slightly. The passengers resumed their quiet murmurs, the bus once again filled with the hum of everyday life. But Malik couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. It wasn't just about the officer anymore. It was about what his father's actions meant, about the power dynamics, the way people responded to authority, and how one moment of courage could set things in motion that couldn't be undone. Malik's mind raced, but one thought kept circling back to him. His father had just publicly humiliated a fellow officer. What would that mean for Chief Roberts, for his career? Would he face consequences for his actions? Or was this just another chapter in a system that protected its own? The answers would come soon enough, but for now, the uncertainty hung over Malik like a cloud. His father's protection couldn't shield him from the harsh realities of the world forever. But in that moment, as the bus made its way toward their destination, Malik couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, his father's example of standing up for what was right would be the spark he needed to keep fighting, even when the world seemed so unjust. As the bus rolled on, Malik couldn't shake the image of the officer leaving, his head low, shoulders slumped in defeat. It felt surreal. The officer, so full of venom and ridicule just moments before, now looked like a man who had lost everything. Malik didn't take any joy in his defeat, though. In fact, the whole situation left him feeling hollow. He had never wanted to be at the center of such drama, and certainly never imagined it would involve his father in this way. The streets outside seemed blurry as they passed by. Malik was used to the world being a blur. His blindness had made him adept at interpreting the world through sounds and vibrations. But today, Everything felt out of focus in a different way. His father's words echoed in his mind. Your strength isn't in how others treat you. It's in how you handle it. But Malik wasn't sure how he was supposed to handle all of this. It felt like too much, like too many pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. The bus came to a halt as it reached the next stop, and Malik's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of someone sitting beside him. He didn't need to turn his head to know who it was. The smell of vanilla and floral perfume filled the air, and the soft, rhythmic tapping of a cane on the floor confirmed it. It was the pregnant woman he had given up his seat to. She had been quiet during the whole incident with the officer, but now, she seemed like she wanted to say something. Hey, thank you for what you did back there, she said softly, her voice sincere. I don't know if you realized how much it meant to me. I'm grateful. Malik nodded, not really sure how to respond. Her words were kind, but they felt empty, like a surface-level politeness that didn't address the deeper issue. It was nice that she appreciated his gesture, but what about the officer? What about the humiliation he had felt? What about the fact that no one had spoken up when it mattered? That was the part that hurt the most, the silence of the crowd. The awkward avoidance. The feeling of being invisible, even though people saw him. I didn't mean to cause a scene, Malik replied quietly. I thought it was the right thing to do. The woman smiled gently, but there was something in her expression that suggested she didn't entirely understand. She was probably thinking of her own discomfort in that moment, how awkward it must have been to witness the confrontation. But Malik wasn't sure if she grasped the weight of what had just happened. It wasn't just about him offering his seat. It was about standing up against the prejudice that was lurking just beneath the surface, the cruelty that people too often dismissed as jokes. I get it, the woman said after a long pause. It's just sometimes people don't know how to react to kindness, you know? Malik wasn't sure how to respond to that either. She was right in a way. People didn't know how to react to kindness, not in a world where harshness and indifference often dominated. But Malik's mind was elsewhere. His father's presence had already started to feel like both a blessing and a curse. The officer's exit wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of something bigger, something that Malik wasn't sure he was prepared for. Chief Roberts had made it clear that he wanted Malik to be strong, to stand up for himself, but Malik couldn't help but feel the weight of his father's position hanging over him. The chief wasn't just a father to Malik. He was the face of authority in their city, someone whose actions could ripple through the community. What had just happened, publicly confronting an officer, humiliating him in front of witnesses, could lead to consequences. Would the officer keep quiet about what had happened, or would he seek revenge? Would there be a backlash against Malik's family, against his father's career? And then there was the question Malik couldn't stop thinking about. Why had his father even been on the bus in the first place? Chief Roberts wasn't the type to take public transportation, not with his position. Was he there by coincidence, or had he been watching? Malik tried to shake off the thoughts, but they lingered like an unsettling fog, making it hard to focus on anything else. As the bus rolled on, Malik caught sight of the people around him. They had been witnesses to everything, but none of them had stepped in. Was that because they were afraid? Or was it because they didn't care? Malik's heart sank as he thought about the officer's words earlier. How many times had people let things slide, brushed off the cruelty they saw in the world because it didn't affect them directly? The truth was, the officer's cruelty wasn't a surprise to Malik. He had seen it before in small, subtle ways, people ignoring him, avoiding eye contact, treating him like he was invisible. What stung more than the officer's mocking words was the realization that people like the officer existed everywhere. The world was filled with them, and the more Malik thought about it, the more it seemed like the world was built to protect them. At that moment, Malik's phone buzzed in his pocket, a welcome distraction from his spiraling thoughts. He pulled it out, feeling the familiar sense of relief that came with seeing something normal, something in his control. It was a message from his best friend, Jalen. Yo, Malik. You good? Heard about what happened on the bus. That officer's a joke. Call me when you can, bro. We need to talk. Malik stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the screen. Jalen had been there for him through thick and thin, always the voice of reason, the one who saw the world the same way Malik did. Jalen wasn't just his friend. He was a brother. But this message wasn't just about checking in on him. It felt like a warning. Jalen didn't know all the details of what had happened yet, but Malik could sense the concern in his words. There was more to this than what anyone had seen, and Malik wasn't sure if he was ready to dive deeper into it. A soft click of the door opening interrupted his thoughts. He looked up, but it wasn't the stop they had been waiting for. Instead, a man stepped on board, someone who Malik didn't recognize. The man was tall, dressed in a sharp suit, and walked with a confidence that immediately caught Malik's attention. There was something about him that felt off. Malik's heart skipped a beat as he realized that the man was heading straight toward his father, who stood near the front of the bus, still overseeing the situation with the officer. Malik couldn't hear what the man said, but the tension in the air was unmistakable. Whatever this was, it didn't feel like a friendly conversation. The man's gaze flicked to Malik, and their eyes met for just a moment. In that fleeting exchange, Malik felt a chill run down his spine. Something wasn't right. Something was about to unfold, and Malik had no idea just how deep this rabbit hole would go. The man in the suit stood at the front of the bus, his eyes fixed on Chief Roberts with an intensity that sent a chill through the air. Malik could feel it. There was something dangerous about the way the man moved, something predatory. His presence seemed to suck the warmth out of the bus, leaving only an icy stillness behind. Malik's heart raced as the man spoke quietly to his father. He couldn't hear their words, but the tension between them was palpable, thick enough to cut through the hum of the bus. People around Malik started to shift uncomfortably, glancing from the suited man to Chief Roberts, clearly sensing that something important, something unsettling, was happening. Even the pregnant woman who had thanked him earlier now sat rigid, her hands clenched in her lap as she stared at the exchange. The man in the suit's lips moved again, his voice low, too quiet to make out. But it wasn't the words that grabbed Malik's attention, it was the body language. The way his father's posture stiffened, his eyes narrowing, as if the man had just dropped a bombshell. Malik could feel the atmosphere on the bus shift, a collective awareness settling over the passengers as they watched the unfolding interaction with a mix of curiosity and fear. Malik wanted to ask what was going on, to turn to his father and demand answers, but something in the air told him to stay silent. This wasn't a conversation for him to interrupt. His father, the chief of police, was no stranger to tense situations, but this felt different. This was not about policing or justice. It was about power, and Malik could sense it, the subtle but unmistakable weight of influence pressing down on everything. As the minutes ticked by, the bus grew heavier with silence. The suited man gestured toward the door, as if signaling to his father that their conversation was over. Chief Roberts nodded, but his face was still unreadable. He glanced briefly in Malik's direction, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if silently telling him to stay put. But Malik couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change, something irreversible. The suited man turned sharply, heading toward the exit with a kind of decisiveness that left no room for doubt. He was leaving, but not without a purpose. His gaze locked on Malik one last time as he passed, and for a split second, the two of them were caught in a strange, electric moment. It wasn't just the man's eyes that held Malik in place, it was the weight of everything that had just transpired. The officer's mockery, the chief's intervention, the tension between them all, it was all leading to something. When the door shut behind the man in the suit, the bus seemed to exhale, the pressure in the air releasing just a fraction. But the quiet didn't last long. Chief Roberts took a step forward, his voice low but unmistakable. "Malik, we need to talk," he said, his tone no longer that of a father trying to console his son. It was the voice of the chief, the voice that commanded attention, the one that left no room for argument. His gaze swept over the other passengers, who, if they had been watching closely, might have caught the subtle shift in his demeanor. But to Malik, it was obvious. Whatever had just transpired had left his father on edge, and Malik wasn't sure whether it was because of the man in the suit or something deeper, something darker. The bus began to slow as it approached their stop, and the quiet murmur of the other passengers filled the void left by the strange conversation. Malik's mind was racing. The man in the suit, his father's reaction, the weight of the officer's words, all of it had built up into something Malik didn't understand. But one thing was clear. The stakes were higher now, much higher than they had been just an hour ago. Is it about the officer? Malik finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He couldn't stop himself from speaking. The curiosity gnawed at him. What did he want? Chief Roberts didn't answer immediately. His eyes flicked to the door as the bus slowed, but he didn't make a move to leave. It's complicated, he said, his voice tight, as if he was carefully choosing his words. Some things aren't as simple as they seem. Malik's gut twisted. What's going to happen now? Is this going to be a big deal? Chief Roberts looked down at him for a long moment, his face hard to read. Then, finally, he nodded once. Yes, he said softly. It's going to be a big deal. The bus came to a stop, and Malik could feel the weight of the moment press down on him. The other passengers began to get up, preparing to exit, but Malik couldn't move. He didn't want to leave yet. Not before he understood what was happening, not before he knew what his father was really up against. But Chief Roberts remained silent as they disembarked, his expression unreadable as he motioned for Malik to follow him. There was no hurry in his movements, but Malik could feel the tension building between them. Whatever had just happened on that bus wasn't just about one officer's mistake. It was something much larger, a series of events that had set something dangerous in motion. Malik followed his father off the bus, the cold air hitting him in the face as they stepped onto the sidewalk. The city around them seemed alive, but to Malik, it felt suffocating, as though the walls were closing in. Without a word, Chief Roberts started walking toward their car. Malik hesitated for a moment, glancing around, as though he might spot the suited man again. But the street was empty, save for the hum of distant traffic. What was that man talking about? Malik pressed, his voice trembling slightly. He couldn't hold the question in anymore. Chief Roberts stopped, turning to face him. The look in his eyes was hard, cold. "We'll talk about it at home," he said, his voice low and final. Malik nodded, his stomach twisting with a feeling he couldn't name. He wanted to protest, wanted to demand answers right here and now, but he knew his father well enough to know that pushing further wasn't going to help. The silence between them was unbearable, each step toward their car heavy with the promise of a conversation that would change everything. As they reached the car, Malik's mind was spinning. The world outside felt too big, too overwhelming. He could feel something building, something that was going to explode, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for it. His father opened the door and slid into the driver's seat without saying another word. Malik hesitated, then climbed in beside him, the weight of the silence settling heavily between them. The engine started, and they pulled away from the curb, the city's streets stretching out before them. Unpredictable, dangerous, and filled with secrets. Malik didn't know what to expect next. But one thing was certain. This was just the beginning. The drive home was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of papers in the back seat. Malik's thoughts were racing, each one colliding with the next. His father had been different tonight, distant, almost unrecognizable in his tension. It was as if a part of him, the one Malik had always known, had been replaced by someone else, someone far more guarded and secretive. Malik couldn't shake the feeling that his father was keeping something from him, something important. As they turned onto their street, Malik's stomach twisted again. He was used to being in control, used to navigating his world with precision and patience, but tonight, everything felt out of place. He couldn't help but wonder, had the officer's taunts really been just a fluke, or was there something more to it? Was that suited man's visit a random encounter, or had it all been carefully orchestrated? The car slowed as they neared their house, the familiar sight of their home doing little to ease the growing knot in Malik's chest. He could see the light in the kitchen window, a small comfort, but it felt distant, like everything was happening too fast, too out of his control. Chief Roberts pulled into the driveway and cut the engine. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Malik's pulse quickened, his curiosity gnawing at him, but he didn't want to push his father.
Not now.
Not when he could see the man's jaw set tight, the weariness in his eyes too deep to ignore. Finally, Malik broke the silence. "Dad, what's going on?" His voice was quiet, but it carried a sense of urgency. "I need to know." Chief Roberts exhaled slowly, running a hand over his face, as if he were trying to summon the right words. He didn't look at Malik immediately, instead staring out the windshield for a long, heavy moment. "It's not that simple, son," he muttered, almost to himself. "This is bigger than you think." Malik's chest tightened. Bigger than he thought? What did that even mean? What was going on in his father's world that Malik didn't understand? There was a part of him that wanted to demand answers, to push his father into telling him everything, but something held him back. Malik could feel it in the air, something shifting, something volatile just under the surface. "Are you saying this has to do with me?" Malik asked cautiously. "The officer, the guy in the suit, everything? You're telling me this isn't just about the bus incident?" His father finally turned to face him, his eyes dark with something Malik couldn't quite place. "I can't explain everything right now. But yes, it's connected. It's all connected." Before Malik could respond, the sound of a car pulling up behind them interrupted the moment. The headlights blared through the rearview mirror, casting long shadows over the driveway. Malik's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't expecting anyone. And from the way his father tensed, neither was he. Chief Roberts opened the door slowly, his eyes scanning the yard. Malik didn't need to ask to know that something wasn't right. His father's posture was rigid, alert, like a soldier preparing for something he couldn't control. "Stay in the car," his father said firmly, his voice low but commanding. Malik opened his mouth to protest, but his father's sharp glance silenced him. "Now, Malik." Reluctantly, Malik remained in the car as his father stepped out and closed the door behind him. Malik's mind was racing. Who was this? And why had his father reacted so on edge? The minutes felt like hours as Malik sat, his fingers tapping nervously against the door handle. He strained to hear, to catch even the slightest sound that could explain the tension outside, but there was nothing, just the occasional rustle of the wind, the distant hum of traffic, and the oppressive silence that seemed to have settled around the house. Then, without warning, the sound of raised voices reached Malik's ears. His heart leaped into his throat. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Confrontation. Aggression. And then, a sharp, authoritative voice, his father's voice, cut through the air, but it was colder than Malik had ever heard it before. It wasn't the voice of the chief of police. It was the voice of someone desperate, someone cornered. Malik's grip tightened on the seat. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He wasn't sure what was happening, but he could feel it, the same feeling that had gnawed at him all night. The unease, the fear. Something was about to break. The voices grew louder, and Malik couldn't sit still any longer. He opened the car door just a crack, enough to peer outside. His eyes widened as he saw two figures standing at the edge of the driveway, their silhouettes dark against the streetlights. His father stood in front of them, his stance protective but strained. Malik couldn't see their faces clearly, but one of them, the man on the right, was unmistakable. It was the suited man from the bus. The man who had talked to his father earlier, the man who had left with that strange, unsettling air about him. But this time, the suited man wasn't alone. There was someone with him, someone taller, broader, wearing a jacket with a badge. The uniform was familiar, but the insignia was not. It wasn't one Malik recognized. The man in the uniform took a step forward, his face unreadable. His voice was low but clear, laced with authority. "We need to talk, Chief." Malik's breath caught in his throat. The tension was unbearable. What was this? Who were these people and why were they here? His father's voice rose, sharp and warning. "You're not welcome here." The suited man stepped closer, his gaze flicking briefly toward the house before returning to Chief Roberts. "This isn't a request. It's a summons." The words hung in the air like a dagger, and Malik's world tilted on its axis. A summons? What did that even mean? Why were these strangers, these officials, demanding something from his father, and why had they come now, at this moment? The wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the yard as the two figures stood there, staring down his father. And in that instant, Malik knew that whatever was going to happen next would change everything. The atmosphere outside the car felt charged, as if the air itself had thickened with every passing second. Malik could feel his heart pounding in his chest, each beat louder than the last, as he watched his father stand firm in the driveway. The suited man and the officer weren't backing down, their presence suffocating, forcing Malik to finally step out of the car, despite the warning look his father shot him. "Stay inside, Malik," Chief Roberts ordered, his voice hard as granite. But Malik couldn't. The weight of the situation, the tension in the air, the fear rising in his chest, was too much to ignore. He had to understand. He had to know what was happening to his father. As he stepped toward the driveway, his father's gaze met his, and for the first time, Malik saw something that unsettled him. It wasn't just worry, it was fear. Fear that didn't belong in his father's eyes. The suited man smirked, clearly aware of the growing unease. "You think you can hide this from your son, Chief? You really believe you can protect him from the truth?" Chief Roberts' jaw tightened. "You don't know what you're talking about. Leave now, or I'll call for backup." The officer behind the suited man took a step forward, his hand resting on the baton at his side. "That's where you're wrong, Chief. You're already in deeper than you think." Malik's mind was racing. The suited man's words didn't make sense. What did he mean by that? What could be so deep, so serious, that his father was this shaken? His pulse quickened as he stood there, caught between the confrontation and his need for answers. "Who are you people?" Malik asked, his voice shaky but determined. "What do you want from my father?" The suited man turned his attention to Malik, his eyes cold and calculating. "It's not about what we want from him, boy. It's about what he's been hiding from everyone." He stepped closer to Malik, his presence imposing. "Your father's been keeping secrets. Big ones." Malik felt a chill run down his spine, the pieces of the puzzle starting to fall into place, but not quite making sense. Secrets? What could they be talking about? His father had always been the pillar of their community, a man of integrity. This didn't feel right. "Enough," Chief Roberts growled, his fists clenching by his sides. "I'm warning you. Leave now, or I won't hesitate to take this further." But the suited man didn't seem threatened. Instead, he smiled, a smile that sent an icy shiver through Malik. "I think you'll find that you don't have a choice anymore, Chief. This isn't your decision." Suddenly, the officer at the suited man's side spoke, his voice a low rumble. "We've been tracking your movements for months, Chief. We know all about your connections, your alliances." Malik felt his stomach churn, his mind racing. What were they talking about? What did they know? And why was his father being dragged into this? The tension was thick, nearly unbearable, and for a moment, all Malik could hear was the pounding of his own heart in his ears. "You're under investigation," the suited man continued, his voice venomous. "And this time, there's no escaping it." Malik's legs went weak, the weight of the words sinking in. His father, his strong, steadfast father, was being investigated? How was that possible? It didn't make sense. There was no way. Chief Roberts had always been the most upstanding, loyal person Malik knew. "I didn't do anything wrong," Chief Roberts said, his voice steady but laced with a hint of panic. "You don't know what you're dealing with. You have no idea." But the suited man cut him off. "Don't we? We've got everything we need. The deals, the bribes, the under-the-table exchanges. We've been watching you for months, Roberts. You can't run from this anymore." The air around Malik felt suffocating, and his world tilted as the pieces clicked together. His father had always been a public figure, someone everyone trusted, but what if the man he looked up to wasn't who he thought he was? What if there were things about his father that even Malik didn't know? The weight of it was almost too much to bear. And then, as if to confirm his worst fears, the suited man's next words hit like a hammer. "You thought you could hide all of it, but we've been gathering information on your operations, on your connections. All of it. And now, it's time to expose you. To everyone." Malik felt the ground shift beneath him. His heart raced faster than ever. The chief, his father, was being accused of things Malik couldn't even fathom. And the most terrifying part was that it was true. He could see it in his father's eyes. The fear, the guilt, the regret. It was all there, unspoken, but so clear now. But just as Malik thought everything was about to unravel, something strange happened. The suited man suddenly froze. His eyes widened for a split second, and his expression twisted in disbelief. He stepped back, looking at the officer beside him, confusion spreading across his face. "Sir, something's wrong," the officer said, his voice barely above a whisper. The suited man frowned, turning his attention to Malik's father. "What's going on?" he demanded. Before Chief Roberts could answer, there was a loud, unmistakable crack from across the street. A flash of blue and red lights illuminated the neighborhood, followed by the screeching sound of tires against the pavement. The suited man's face turned pale as he turned toward the source of the noise, his entire demeanor shifting from confidence to panic in an instant. The officer by his side pulled out his phone, his hands shaking as he looked at the screen. "It's happening. They found it. They're coming for us." In a flash, everything changed. The suited man's composure shattered, and he and the officer exchanged frantic glances. The confidence that had once filled the air dissolved into pure chaos. "We need to go. Now," the suited man barked, his voice tight with panic. "Get in the car. Move." The officer hesitated, staring at the approaching sirens in the distance, then turned and sprinted toward the car they had arrived in. The suited man followed, his face twisted with frustration and fear. As the two of them rushed to their vehicle, Malik could hardly believe what was happening. The world was shifting so fast, so violently, that he couldn't keep up. His father stood still, watching the men scramble to escape, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "Dad, what just happened?" Malik whispered, his voice trembling. Chief Roberts looked at him, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and relief. "It's over," he said, his voice barely audible. "But not in the way you think." Before Malik could ask anything else, the sound of distant sirens grew louder, and the suited man's car screeched away into the night, disappearing into the shadows. And just like that, everything that had been building, everything that had seemed so dangerous was suddenly gone. But as the chief turned to Malik, his face darkened again. "This is far from over. They're not done with us yet. They won't stop." Malik didn't know whether to feel relief or dread. He had no idea what was coming next, but he knew that his life, and his father's, would never be the same again. The night was quiet again, but the calm felt different now, almost unsettling. Malik stood frozen, his eyes on his father, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. The suited man and the officer were gone, but the weight of their presence lingered like a dark cloud over their house. Malik could feel the uncertainty in the air, and his mind was racing. What had they been after? What had his father been hiding? Chief Roberts stood tall, though his shoulders were slumped with exhaustion. His expression was unreadable, but Malik could see the exhaustion in the lines of his father's face. He was a man who had spent his life fighting for what was right, but now, for the first time, Malik saw cracks in the armor. "Dad, what was all that?" Malik asked, his voice trembling but steady. For a moment, his father didn't speak. Instead, he turned away, walking slowly toward the porch. Malik followed, the questions in his head multiplying with every step. It was like every new answer he thought he might find only led to more confusion. Once they were seated on the porch, the cool night air seemed to settle between them, thick with unspoken words. Malik waited patiently, knowing that his father needed time. But the silence felt heavy, and the longer it stretched, the harder it became to breathe. Finally, Chief Roberts spoke, his voice softer than Malik had ever heard it. "Malik, there's a lot I haven't told you. Things I never wanted you to know." He paused, and Malik could see the struggle in his eyes, like it was taking everything he had to speak these words. "The man you saw tonight, the one in the suit, he's from a task force that's been investigating corruption in the police force for years. I've been involved in a covert operation to expose the criminals working within the department." Malik blinked, trying to wrap his mind around the words. His father, a part of something so dangerous? It didn't make sense. But why didn't you tell me? Why keep this from me? His father sighed, rubbing a hand across his face. Because I wanted to protect you. I've always wanted to protect you from the things I had to face. But sometimes you don't get to choose who you become, Malik. You don't get to choose the things you're forced to deal with. And you definitely don't get to choose who you trust. Malik's chest tightened, but he could see the truth in his father's eyes. He had spent his entire life thinking of his father as someone untouchable, someone who always knew the right thing to do. Now, the man he admired was vulnerable, caught in a web of secrets and lies that had been spinning long before Malik was born. You were undercover? Malik asked, his voice barely above a whisper. And you never told me? I couldn't, his father said, shaking his head slowly. I didn't want to bring you into this world. It's messy and it's dangerous. I've had to make choices that I'm not proud of. There are people who would do anything to keep the truth from getting out, people who don't care who gets hurt in the process. Malik's mind was spinning, trying to digest all of this. It was hard to accept, but it explained so much. The late nights, the phone calls he wasn't supposed to overhear, the way his father always seemed to know what was going on behind the scenes, even when no one else did. So, what now? Malik asked, finally voicing the question that had been building in his chest. Are you done? Is it over? Chief Roberts looked at his son, his expression weary.
No, Malik.
It's not over. They'll be back. They'll always be looking for a way to get to me. But I've made my peace with it. I did what I thought was right. I didn't do this for glory, or for anyone's approval. I did it because it needed to be done. Malik leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on the dark horizon. He didn't know if he could fully understand everything his father had done. The lines between right and wrong seemed so blurred now, and the fear he had felt earlier was still there, lingering. But in that moment, Malik realized something that he hadn't before. His father wasn't perfect. He was human, just like everyone else. And maybe that's what made him stronger. What about the note? Malik asked, bringing up the moment from the bus. The one the pregnant woman gave me? Chief Roberts' gaze softened, and for the first time that night, a hint of a smile tugged at his lips. The woman. Her name is Laura. She used to work with me. She's been helping me, giving me information about the investigation. The note was her way of telling you that you're not alone. That there are people out there who are fighting for what's right, even when it feels like you're standing alone in the dark. Malik took a deep breath, the tension in his body slowly starting to release. The mystery of the note, the sudden visit from the suited man, and the confusion surrounding his father's actions, all of it was slowly falling into place. But the questions weren't all answered. Not yet. But the officer, Malik asked, the one who came with them, he wasn't just a random cop, was he? Chief Roberts' expression darkened again.
No.
He's one of them. One of the officers who's been on the wrong side of this fight. I knew it was only a matter of time before he'd come after me. But I didn't expect him to involve you. Malik nodded slowly. I get it now. You didn't want me to be involved in all this. You didn't want me to know what you were doing. Exactly, his father replied. But sometimes, the truth has a way of finding you, whether you're ready for it or not. As they sat in silence, the reality of everything that had happened began to sink in. Malik thought back to the moment on the bus, when he had given up his seat to the pregnant woman. He never could have imagined how that simple act of kindness would lead to everything that followed. That note, that life-changing message, had been the first clue in a much larger story, one that Malik would now have to navigate alongside his father. The sirens that had once seemed so threatening now felt distant, a reminder of the fight that was still ongoing. But Malik knew something he hadn't before, that he wasn't alone in this. His father was flawed, yes, but he was still the same man who had always tried to do what was right. And that was something worth holding on to. Do you think it's over, Dad? Malik asked quietly, his voice carrying a hint of uncertainty. His father didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked up at the stars above them, his expression thoughtful. No, he said at last. It's never really over. But we keep fighting anyway. And with that, Malik finally understood. Life wasn't about having all the answers. It was about standing up, even when the world seemed uncertain. Even when you didn't know what the next day would bring. It was about finding your strength, your purpose, and holding on to the people who mattered most. For the first time in a long while, Malik felt a sense of peace. The night was still dark, but he could see a glimmer of hope on the horizon. His father had made mistakes, yes, but they were in this together now. And no matter what came next, Malik was ready to face it, because he knew that, sometimes, the hardest battles were the ones you fought with the people you loved. The night was quiet again, but the calm felt different now, almost unsettling. Malik stood frozen, his eyes on his father, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. The suited man and the officer were gone, but the weight of their presence lingered like a dark cloud over their house. Malik could feel the uncertainty in the air, and his mind was racing. What had they been after? What had his father been hiding? Chief Robert stood tall, though his shoulders were slumped with exhaustion. His expression was unreadable, but Malik could see the exhaustion in the lines of his father's face. He was a man who had spent his life fighting for what was right, but now, for the first time, Malik saw cracks in the armor. "Dad, what was all that?" Malik asked, his voice trembling but steady. For a moment, his father didn't speak. Instead, he turned away, walking slowly toward the porch. Malik followed, the questions in his head multiplying with every step. It was like every new answer he thought he might find only led to more confusion. Once they were seated on the porch, the cool night air seemed to settle between them, thick with unspoken words. Malik waited patiently, knowing that his father needed time. But the silence felt heavy, and the longer it stretched, the harder it became to breathe. Finally, Chief Robert spoke, his voice softer than Malik had ever heard it. "Malik, there's a lot I haven't told you. Things I never wanted you to know." He paused, and Malik could see the struggle in his eyes, like it was taking everything he had to speak these words. "The man you saw tonight, the one in the suit, he's from a task force that's been investigating corruption in the police force for years. I've been involved in a covert operation to expose the criminals working within the department." Malik blinked, trying to wrap his mind around the words. His father, a part of something so dangerous? It didn't make sense. But why didn't you tell me? Why keep this from me? His father sighed, rubbing a hand across his face. "Because I wanted to protect you. I've always wanted to protect you from the things I had to face. But sometimes you don't get to choose who you become, Malik. You don't get to choose the things you're forced to deal with. And you definitely don't get to choose who you trust." Malik's chest tightened, but he could see the truth in his father's eyes. He had spent his entire life thinking of his father as someone untouchable, someone who always knew the right thing to do. Now, the man he admired was vulnerable, caught in a web of secrets and lies that had been spinning long before Malik was born. "You were undercover?" Malik asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "And you never told me?" "I couldn't," his father said, shaking his head slowly. "I didn't want to bring you into this world. It's messy and it's dangerous. I've had to make choices that I'm not proud of. There are people who would do anything to keep the truth from getting out, people who don't care who gets hurt in the process." Malik's mind was spinning, trying to digest all of this. It was hard to accept, but it explained so much. The late nights, the phone calls he wasn't supposed to overhear, the way his father always seemed to know what was going on behind the scenes, even when no one else did. "So, what now?" Malik asked, finally voicing the question that had been building in his chest. "Are you done? Is it over?" Chief Roberts looked at his son, his expression weary.
"No, Malik."
"It's not over. They'll be back. They'll always be looking for a way to get to me. But I've made my peace with it. I did what I thought was right. I didn't do this for glory, or for anyone's approval. I did it because it needed to be done." Malik leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on the dark horizon. He didn't know if he could fully understand everything his father had done. The lines between right and wrong seemed so blurred now, and the fear he had felt earlier was still there, lingering. But in that moment, Malik realized something that he hadn't before. His father wasn't perfect. He was human, just like everyone else. And Maybe that's what made him stronger. What about the note? Malik asked, bringing up the moment from the bus. The one the pregnant woman gave me? Chief Robert's gaze softened, and for the first time that night, a hint of a smile tugged at his lips. The woman. Her name is Laura. She used to work with me. She's been helping me, giving me information about the investigation. The note was her way of telling you that you're not alone. That there are people out there who are fighting for what's right, even when it feels like you're standing alone in the dark. Malik took a deep breath, the tension in his body slowly starting to release. The mystery of the note, the sudden visit from the suited man, and the confusion surrounding his father's actions, all of it was slowly falling into place. But the questions weren't all answered. Not yet. But the officer, Malik asked, the one who came with them, he wasn't just a random cop, was he? Chief Robert's expression darkened again.
No.
He's one of them. One of the officers who's been on the wrong side of this fight. I knew it was only a matter of time before he'd come after me. But I didn't expect him to involve you. Malik nodded slowly. I get it now. You didn't want me to be involved in all this. You didn't want me to know what you were doing. Exactly, his father replied. But sometimes, the truth has a way of finding you, whether you're ready for it or not. As they sat in silence, the reality of everything that had happened began to sink in. Malik thought back to the moment on the bus, when he had given up his seat to the pregnant woman. He never could have imagined how that simple act of kindness would lead to everything that followed. That note, that life-changing message, had been the first clue in a much larger story, one that Malik would now have to navigate alongside his father. The sirens that had once seemed so threatening now felt distant, a reminder of the fight that was still ongoing. But Malik knew something he hadn't before, that he wasn't alone in this. His father was flawed, yes, but he was still the same man who had always tried to do what was right. And that was something worth holding on to. Do you think it's over, Dad? Malik asked quietly, his voice carrying a hint of uncertainty. His father didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked up at the stars above them, his expression thoughtful. No, he said at last. It's never really over. But we keep fighting anyway. And with that, Malik finally understood. Life wasn't about having all the answers. It was about standing up, even when the world seemed uncertain. Even when you didn't know what the next day would bring. It was about finding your strength, your purpose, and holding on to the people who mattered most. For the first time in a long while, Malik felt a sense of peace. The night was still dark, but he could see a glimmer of hope on the horizon. His father had made mistakes, yes, but they were in this together now. And no matter what came next, Malik was ready to face it, because he knew that, sometimes, the hardest battles were the ones you fought with the people you loved.